So let's start, no, without any further delay and ado. So let's start with question number one. So before I give you the right answer, no, I want to hear from you, no. Mag-answer po muna kayo before I give the question para naman ma-assess po natin yung knowledge natin and kahandaan, no, sa natural science. Okay, this is our first question. Sugar compounds such as monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides are also classified as A, carbohydrates, B, lipids, C, proteins, D, nucleotides. So lahat ay nag-A. So tama po kayo. For question number one, our answer would be letter A, carbohydrates. No? So basically, no, just a short review. Your carbohydrate is part of the four macromolecules, no? So ano itong mga four macromolecules? So these are actually complex molecules that are essential for life to exist in our planet Earth. So basically, all life forms are comprised of these four major macromolecules. No? What are these macromolecules? So first one is your carbohydrate, no? Second would be your protein. Third would be your fats and lipids. And D, your nucleotides. So, saan po natin makikita yung carbohydrates, no? In a cell. Saan po ba? Saan po naka-incorporate ang ating mga carbohydrates? May idea po ba tayo? So, yung carbohydrates, actually, merong makikita sa cell membrane, no, for example. But most of the time, your carbohydrates is used as a source of energy. No? So, as we eat our food, as we acquire food from our environment, what we digest first is actually carbohydrate. So, carbohydrate is our first source of energy. And that energy is in the form of ATP, no? Adenosine triphosphate. If, for example, wala na po tayong carbohydrates na magagamit for digestion and source of energy, so if, for example, wala na tayong magagamit na carbohydrates for digestion or source of energy, the next macromolecule that is our source of energy would be your fats and lipids. No? For the fats and lipids, you can also see them in your cell membrane as well as in the cytoplasm. So there are numerous lipid forms and types that can be found in your inside the cell. Next would be the protein. So proteins are basically the fundamental blocks for all cell. And take note, your cell comprise all life forms on our planet Earth. So basically, you cannot have life, no, you cannot have your functional cell without the presence of your proteins. And then lastly, no, you have nucleotides. Yung nucleotides po natin ay nakikita sa genetic materials, no? Our DNA and RNA are made up of nucleotides, no, in the form of nucleotide bases. So in your DNA, you have four different types of nucleotide bases, no? The adenine, the cytosine, guanine, and thymine. But when you go to RNA, you have five different bases, no? So yung apat andun din, no, the adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, but there is now no, sorry. Yung apat andun, no, except for the thymine, no, because in your RNA, the thymine would be replaced by your uracil. No? So here, for question number one, the answer is A, because under carbohydrates, you have several types. No? So you have monosaccharide, disaccharide, polysaccharide, at meron din po tayong oligosaccharide. So what are these types? No? It has something to do with no, monomers or a functional unit in your carbohydrate. So when you say monosaccharide, may isa pong unit ng carbohydrate doon. No? Isang functional unit. When you say di, dalawa na sila. No? When you say poly, marami na pong chains of several functional units. No? So, yun po. Number one, all of these are actually under carbohydrates. Let's go to question number two. So condensed water vapors in the clouds, when mixed with sulfur oxides coming from your motor vehicles and industrial plants, falls to Earth in the form of A. Acid rain, B. Greenhouse gas, C. El Nino, D. La Nina. Okay, lahat na naman ay sumagot ng letter A. And you are correct. So for number 2, the answer is acid rain. Now, if you have emissions of sulfur oxides, your sulfur oxides can be in the form of SO2 or SO3. No? As they mix themselves with water vapor, ano po yung chemical composition ng water vapor? Anyone? What's the chemical composition of water? Hala, walang walang nakakaalam? Oh yes, H2O. Okay. So, yung water, no, may it be of any type, no, distilled water, tap water, salt water, sea water, groundwater. If you say water, always the chemical composition of water is H2O, meaning you have two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen. Now, if your H2O combines with a sulfur oxide, say SO3, then that's the time they will form another compound in the form of H2SO4, which is actually your sulfuric acid. No? So all of these emissions, no, the sulfur oxides coming from our industrial plants and vehicles and other sources of pollutants, when these emissions mixed with the condensed water vapor in our clouds, then that's the time we form sulfuric acid. And this sulfuric acid would be diluted in the condensed water vapor also, and it will fall to the earth in the form of acid rain. So basically, that's the principle behind the creation of acid rain. So acid rain is a polluted rainwater eventually. Okay, so let's go to question number 3. Which of the following are the components of fungal cell wall? So A, nucleotides, proteins, and sugar. B, lipids, proteins, and sugar. C, cellulose, lipids, and nucleic acids. D, chitin, proteins, and sugar. So ang daming sumasagot ng letter D. Well, actually, lahat kayo ay sumagot ng letter D. And I'm so happy because the correct answer is letter B, no? Chitin, proteins, and sugar. Now, fungal cell wall is very much different with the cell wall of uh, organisms under the kingdom Plantae. Why? Because of its composition. No? So what comprises the cell wall of plants? Do you know? Anyone? Ano po yung organic compound na nasa cell wall ng plant, which is different from your fungi? Yes, cellulose. No? So letter C there, the cellulose, the lipids, nucleic acid, walang nucleic acid sa cell wall ng plant. The cellulose is the main component of a plant cell wall. No? So this is actually the main reason why in the past your fungus, no, or the mushrooms, your yeasts and molds are considered to be under the kingdom animals, no, animalia, because of the presence of chitin. No? Your chitin is an organic compound that is highly present in animal scales as well as exoskeleton. So in the past, no, taxonomists and scientists alike, no, they thought that fungi, because of the presence of chitin, is an animal, which is not. So eventually ngayon, your fungus, no, they are now under a different kingdom, no, different from your plant and your animals, which is the kingdom fungi. Your letter A, your nucleotides, proteins, and sugar. Saan kaya yan makikita? Anyone? Nakikita din po yan sa cell, no? So, your nucleotides, your sugar, plus carbohydrates, no? You can also have glycoproteins. They can be found in our genetic material. No? So you have DNA and RNA. Your lipids, protein, sugar, this can also be found in the cell membrane of your cell. No? For instance, you have their glycoproteins, you have their the, the phosphobilipid layer, no? And your sugar in the form of the glycoproteins, which are the receptors for your cell membrane. Okay? Now, um, you also have bacteria with cell wall. No? So the cell wall of your bacteria is also quite different from the cell walls of your fungi and plantae because the main composition of bacterial cell wall is peptidoglycan. Okay, so just remember that. For bacteria, peptidoglycan. For plants, you have cellulose. For fungi, you have chitin. You also have for another kingdom, the algae, you have their what we call diatoms. Your diatoms also have cell walls, but these cell walls are comprised of silicon. So um, if you may notice, they have the same character, which is the cell wall, but that character is comprised of different organic compounds. Peptidoglycan, silicon, cellulose, and chitin. So for number 3, fungal cell wall, it is made up of chitin. Let's go to question number 4. So plants capture energy from the sunlight by means of molecule known as so A, oxygen, B, adenosine triphosphate, C, chlorophyll, D, nitrates. Wow, perfect. So lahat ay sumagot ng letter C. And the answer is letter C, chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the green pigment found in plants. So that's why most of our plants are colored green because of the presence of this green pigment chlorophyll. Eventually, they trap and absorb the energy coming from the sun, no? And then they eventually energize the electrons coming from the splitting of the water molecules for them to form glucose, no? Through the process of photosynthesis. Okay. So for number 4, chlorophyll. That's that's the pigment that captures the energy coming from the sun. Let's go to number 5. So which of the following is true when a block of wood lays at rest on top of a table? So A, there are no forces acting on the table or the block. B, the sum of the forces acting on the block is 0. C, the block is in uniform motion. D, the block is accelerated. Okay, so lahat din ay correct, no? So the answer here would be letter B. The sum of the forces acting on the block is 0. Okay, why? No? If you have a particular book on top of a table, there are two forces acting on it. No? First, you have gravitational pull. This is now the force that that pulls your book, no? Or in this case, your block of wood, no? Towards the ground. The second force here is the normal force that is exerted by the surface of the table, no? To um, support the weight of your wood. So basically, these are the two forces acting on your block: gravitational force and normal force. No? So when we try to go back into what do you call this? The laws of motion, no, by Isaac Newton, you have three laws. No, diba? What's the first law? What's the first law? Inertia. Okay. So um, for answering the question. Okay. So first law of motion, we have law of inertia. And law of inertia states that a an object in motion will remain at motion, or an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an external force. Okay? So that's law of inertia. When you go to second law, you have law of acceleration. And law of acceleration would state that the force for every object would depend on the mass of the object as well the acceleration. So that's law of acceleration. Your third law is law of interaction, which states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what do you think, no, this particular question represents? Would it be the first law of motion, second, or third? Second. Second. Um, Actually, hindi po second. Kasi when we try to go back into our question, di ba po yung block of wood po ninyo, no, ay at rest. No? Hindi po siya gumagalaw. Yes, first, no? So you have their law of inertia. However, when we try to go and incorporate now the two different forces acting on our block of wood, no, it is also a representation of the third law of motion. So basically, you have the first and the third. Why the third? Because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. In this case, you have gravitational pull acting on your wood, and you also have the normal force acting on your wood. No? So basically, your gravity and the normal force are counteracting with one another. Kasi nga po, yung gravity is pulling of your wood towards the ground. Your normal force is pushing your wood upward. So they are counteracting, meaning they are negating one another. So gravity minus your normal force is equal to 0. That is why your block of wood is not moving. Okay? So the answer here should be letter B. Okay, parang yes here. Okay? So wala pong clarification for number 5 before I proceed. Wala naman po. Okay, sige. Let's try to continue to question number 6. Am I too fast or okay lang yung pacing natin? Okay lang, sige. Thank you for confirmation, for confirming. So number 6, no? A virus has a protein shell called A. Capsid, B. Cell membrane, C. Nucleus, D. Nucleotide. So we are talking here about a virus. No? So ang protein shell po niya ay tinatawag na, what do you think is the answer? Hindi po kayo sure? Ano po, A, B, C, or D? O kung hindi po alam, o mag-guess na lang po siguro para Okay, so ang daming sumagot ng A. Sure. Sure po talaga. So letter A is the answer. Yes, capsid. So basically, when we are talking about virus, no, your virus, if they are outside the host, they are just molecules, no, and these molecules are only comprised of a protein shell, which is the capsid, and inside the capsid, you only have the genetic materials RNA and DNA. No more, no less. No? So that's why your viruses don't have these cell membranes. They don't have the nuclei. They don't have the they have the nucleotide bases, no, in the form of DNA and RNA. No? However, they don't have these machineries known as organelles that can metabolize, no, that can make them reproduce, no, and give them the characteristics of life. So therefore, a virus, when when they are outside the host, they are deemed to be non-living entities. Now, they are only molecules. And these molecules are formed by capsid and a genetic material. So it could either be a double-stranded or single-stranded DNA or RNA. Okay? So number 6 is letter A. Number 7, what do you think will mostly happen when a plant cell is placed in a hypotonic solution? So A, there will be no effect on the plant cell. B, the plant cell will swell. C, the plant cell will shrivel. Or D, the cell wall of the plant cell will thicken. So ngayon, yes, letter B po yung answer. No? So for number 7, the answer is letter B. The plant cell will swell. 6 po, ano ang sagot? Ano yung 6? A capsid. For 7B, the plant cell will swell. So basically, no, for solutions, you have 3 types. You have hypotonic solution, you have hypertonic solution, and you also have isotonic solution. So what are the differences between these types of solution? So first one, when you say hypotonic, no, hypotonic means the solution has more water than the salt concentration. No? When you go to hypertonic, hypertonic means that the solution has more salt concentration compared to the water concentration. When you say isotonic, the salt and water concentration inside your cell and on the solution is equal. Okay? So here, since we are putting our plant cell to hypotonic solution, that would mean the solution has higher water concentration compared to the salt concentration inside the cell. So basically, your water molecules would move from the outside environment going inside your cell. So basically, that will swell your cell. Lalaki yung cell nyo. Now, I have a follow-up question. If, for example, you're putting your plant cell in a hypotonic solution, would the plant cell burst? Yes or no? Will it burst? May nag-yes, may nag-no. Tatlong no, dalawang yes. O marami nang nag-no. Actually, it won't burst. No? Unlike your animal cell, no, there would be a certain point where the cell membrane cannot anymore accommodate the water that is coming inside. No? Because they don't have the cell wall. Yes, my cell wall kasi. Yes. No? So basically, your cell wall protects your plant cell from bursting. No? Since your cell wall is very turgid and very rigid and very, what do you call this one? Have high tensile strength. No? That's why your plant cell won't burst. Kasi nga, yung cell wall ninyo is very rigid. Okay? Unlike your animal cells, wala po silang cell wall. So for number 7, your answer is letter B. The plant cell will swell. Number 8. So organisms like lemon ants plays an important role in the ecosystem, such as nutrient cycling, natural mortality agents, and as ecological engineers. The term used to describe the role of organism is called. Okay. My question, no? What will happen, sir, if equal? So if equal yung concentration, no, ng water and salt concentration within and outside your cell, there would be no movement of water as well as of solute. Oh yes. Before I answer question number 8, I would like to discuss the question of Benedict Alicard. That's actually a very good question. What will happen if you have isotonic solution? Okay. So when you say isotonic solution, then the water and the salt concentration inside your cell and outside the cell is equal. And if there is equal, no, in terms of concentrations of both your water and salt, then there is no movement of water. There is no osmosis that will take place. No? What's the consequence of having an isotonic solution if, for example, you are referring to a cell in its natural environment? No? There would be no movement of water. Take note, your water is a universal solvent. So that would mean most of your solutes and most of our nutrients essential for growth and development, sustenance and maintenance of life cannot also move from one place to another. No? If no movement of water, no movement of nutrients, gases, or even waste. So therefore, there is chemical equilibrium. Would that be advantageous for your organism? The answer there is no. Because if there is no movement of water, yes, no. Because if there is no movement of water, then your cell is basically dead. No? So that is what you call chemical equilibrium. For life to persist, no, it should avoid chemical equilibrium. And take note, chemical equilibrium is different from homeostasis. Okay? So, yan po yung start ng confusion kasi, no? Iniisa nila yung homeostasis as well as yung chemical equilibrium. Now, however, your isotonic solution is very important in terms of application. No? For instance, in medical field, no, if you have patients, no, inpatient in hospitals who needs to have dextrose, no, your dextrose are actually nutrients. No, they are liquid food, no, in a sense, dissolved in water. So basically, your dextrose and the water and salt concentration in your bloodstream or in the bloodstream of the patient should be equal so that the red blood cells, as your dextrose is administered to the body, no, the red blood cells of the patient would not swell and burst or shrink. Okay? Because what would happen if you administer a dextrose which is hypotonic to the bloodstream of the patient? No? What will happen if yung dextrose niya is hypotonic? 0.9 normal saline solution, yes. No? So what happens if hypotonic yung nilagay nyo sa pasyente? What would happen to the red blood cells? No, it would swell. Therefore, since these RBCs don't have walls, no, your RBCs would eventually burst. And what would happen if your RBCs burst? Your patient would eventually die. No? masama, masama po yun. No? If your dextrose, on the other hand, would be hypertonic, what would happen to the RBCs of the patient? It would shrink. No? And basically, if your RBC would shrink, no, take note, the form and shape of your proteins and cells are linked to the function of your cells. So there is now a loss of shape of your RBC kasi nag-shrink siya. So since there is a loss of the form and shape, then your RBC cannot anymore function well, which is to carry oxygen and waste, no, distribute them all throughout the body. So basically, masama din po yun. So your dextrose should be isotonic to the bloodstream. So you see now, in the natural environment, isotonic solution is quite deadly, no, for your cells, most especially for unicellular organisms. However, when you go to the application of the isotonic solution, then that's the time you can see the importance of it. So thank you for the question. Let's go back to number 8. Yung answers ninyo sa number 8 is letter D. Letter D lahat. So you're also correct. So far, lahat po tayo ay complete. No? Yung score natin is perfect. No? So number 8, D, ecological niche. So what do you mean by niche? Your niche is the role of your organism in its natural habitat. So you have several roles, no? It could either be For this instance, no, you have here nutrient cycler, no, mortality agent, you have ecological engineers, or you can also see niche in the view of prey-predator relationship. For example, your role in the habitat, you can either be a carnivore or herbivore or omnivore, detritivore, corallivore, insectivore, a combination of two, combination of three, and so on and so forth. So basically, the role in the ecosystem is 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 seemingly limitless. No? So it is for the organism, no, to to find its role, its ecological niche in its habitat, so that that particular species can thrive, no, through time and survive through time. So number 8 here, it shows ecological niche. Let's try to differentiate your niche, succession, your footprint, habitat. So basically, when you say habitat, this is the physical environment as to where your species or organism lives. So that's your habitat. When you go to footprint, ecological footprint, it, it actually refers to the rate for a particular species, most especially humans, our rate on the consumption of natural resources and production of wastes in comparison to the natural environment, no, producing the resources and also processing our waste. So basically, there is some kind of cycle. No? We use natural resources and we generate waste. These wastes, in turn, are being recycled, no, by your detritivores and decomposers, such that it would return back to nature, and then nature will provide us new resources. No? When you say ecological footprint, we are now focusing on the rate or the speed of how we utilize the resources, as well as the speed of the environment to produce the resources. So that is ecological footprint. When you go to ecological succession, this is something to do with ecological and community ecology. No? So when you say succession, for instance, no, if a habitat is a grassland, no, in the past, but after several years, that grassland turns into a forest, then that is what we call ecological succession. No? Um, your grassland is actually a type of habitat where the dominant plants are grasses. That's why grassland. When you say forest, it's a habitat where the dominant plant species are trees. So eventually, there is now a shift and a change in the dominant species present in your habitat. That is what you call succession. There is modification in the dominant type of species, from grasses to trees. Okay? And niche, this is our role in our environment. Okay? So let's go to question number 9. So for 9, the temporary cytoplasmic projections used by amoeba for movement and food capture is called blank. So A, appendages, B, flagellum, C, pseudopodia, D, microfilaments. Wow, so lahat talaga no ay nag-review. Perfect score na naman. So for number 9, the answer is letter C, pseudopodia. No? So pseudopodia means false teeth. No, pseudo means false, no, not true. Podia or pod means feet. So basically, amoeba is a unicellular organism which does not have appendages or feet. What they use are actually cytoplasmic projections, no, as well as shifting of their cell membrane for them to move and acquire food. And these particular projections, no, of your cell membrane together with cytoplasm is what you call a pseudopodia. Okay? So let's go to number 10. Of the energy sources listed below, Which one is considered as the most abundant but still not fully developed? So A, soil, oil, B, sun, C, water waves, D, minerals. Yes. Again, lahat po ay correct. No? So the answer here is letter B. No? Your keyword there is the most abundant. No? Which one is the most abundant? It is actually the sunlight coming from the sun. No? So our source of sunlight is our sun. So basically, every parts of the globe receives sunlight. No? They only differ in the amount of sunlight being received every year. Okay? And in the context of our country, no, the Philippines, we are not yet fully developing, no, and harnessing the power of the sun. No? So basically, yung mga very rich, ano, institutions and factories, they are only the ones who are using photovoltaic cells or yung mga what's you call that solar panels, no, to get energy coming from the sun. However, most of our sectors, no, even here in Cebu, is cannot afford still to have those particular devices. So eventually, um, the energy coming from the sun, although it is the most abundant, but we are not still fully utilizing it. It's not fully developed. So number 10, we have letter B. Number 11. So which of the following microorganisms is considered as non-pathogenic? So A, Plasmodium falciparum, B, Lactobacillus casei, C, influenza virus, D, Yersinia pestis. What do you think is the answer? Oh, okay. So, lahat na naman ay correct, no? Letter B, Lactobacillus casei. So, your Lactobacillus casei is actually the bacterium present in our Yakult, no, drinks. So, when you say non-pathogenic, these are actually the other term is probiotic, no? So they are what you call the good bacteria fighting the bad bacteria. So eventually your A, your C, your D, these are pathogenic. So when you say pathogenic, that's disease causing. Raven, anong Ursin flora? Anyway, for letter A, Plasmodium falciparum, no? A, C, and D are pathogenic. They cause diseases. Now, let's go to letter A. Ano po yung 10? 10 is letter B, sun. So for letter A, ano po yung disease that is caused by Plasmodium falciparum? Gamot, sir. What do you think is the disease caused by letter A, Plasmodium? Anyone? Wala pong nakakaalam? Plasmodium is a protozoa. Yes, Angelique, tama po. No? Plasmodium causes malaria. Eventually, you have 4 species of Plasmodium, if I'm not mistaken. No? Plasmodium falciparum, vivax, ovale, and malariae. All of these microorganisms, all of these bacteria causes malaria. And malaria is a mosquito-borne disease. So your vector there is a mosquito. When you go to letter C, influenza virus, what do you think is the disease caused by letter C? Nasa name na po. Yes, no, flu or influenza. So that's the disease that is caused by your influenza virus. Then you have Yersinia pestis, letter D. Anong answer for, anong answer? Anong disease caused by Yersinia pestis? Yersinia pestis is the cause for, yes, the plague, no? Or the bubonic disease, no? Or made famous as the bubonic plague, no? Or the dark plague. So Yersinia pestis is a bacteria again, which is carried by rat flea, no? Yung mga kuto ng daga. So eventually, if for instance, no, yung mga kuto ay ng daga would be biting a particular person, then that's the time they can transmit the bacteria, and the bacteria can cause now the bubonic disease. Okay? So number 11, the answer is letter B, the Lactobacillus casei or probiotic bacteria. Number 12, a rectangular block uh, a rectangular block of iron has a dimension of 5 cm times 10 cm times 15 cm and weighs approximately 60 Newton. How should this block be placed on top of the table to exert the greatest pressure on the surface? So you have A on the 5 cm times 10 cm side, B on the 5 cm times 15 cm side, C on the 10 cm times 15 cm side. D, all sides of equal pressure. May iba-ibang answer, pero most of you are correct. So the answer here should be letter A. Okay. Why A? No. You have a particular formula for pressure. No? So you have P is equal to F over A. What do you mean by these letters? So you have pressure is equal to force over area. So basically, we are looking for what particular side of our iron block that would exert the greatest pressure. So since there is an indirect proportionality between our force and our area, no? If you try to look at our formula, your force is subdivided by A. So they are indirectly proportional. No? So if this is the case, no, we need to look for the side of your iron block which would have the least area, no? Because when you have the least area and put it in our formula, we will get the highest pressure. Okay? If you have an area there which you will pick has the what you call this one, highest area, then that's the time you would also have the least pressure. So you see, they are inversely proportional. No? So if you increase the one factor, the other factor would decrease. Okay. So in this particular instance, since our options only have the 5 times 10, 5 times 15, and 10 times 15, no? The one here with the least area would be letter A because 5 times 10, that is 50 centimeters squared. No? If you have 5 times 15, that would now become 75 centimeters squared, no? Which is greater than our 50. And then 10 times 15, you have 150, no? And 150 is greater than the 50 centimeters squared. So basically, if you divide now 60 by 50, then you will get 1 point something something. No? When you divide 60 over 75, you will get 0.0 something something. Okay? When you divide 60 with 150, you would also get point something something something. So basically here, you will get the greatest pressure if you divide your force with the least area, which is letter A. Okay? So 12 here is letter A. Sa mga nagtatanong po ng answers at sa sumasagot po sa mga tanong and providing the answers, salamat po sa inyo. Okay? Because I cannot recall the questions there. Thank you. Okay, let's go to question number 13. A toothpick can float on the surface of the water because of blank. So A, surface tension, B, viscosity, C, buoyant force, D, liquid pressure. So, 13. Yeah, lahat ay nag-answer ng letter A and you are all correct. So, eventually, okay, the major confusion here is actually between surface tension and buoyant force. No? So when you say surface tension, this is actually a consequence of the water property, no? Physical water property, which is called cohesion. No? So marami po kayong mga water properties, but cohesion is actually the one who cause surface tension. So what do you mean by cohesion? Cohesion is the attraction between and among several water molecules. Take note, water molecules only. So one water molecule is attracted to another water molecule. That's cohesion. Because when you say adhesion, that's another water property. Adhesion is the attraction of your water molecule to another type of molecule other than water. So for your surface tension, it is cohesion that caused it. Water molecule and water molecule, interaction between the two. Now, your surface tension only supports small things. Okay? So your surface tension, is the main cause for smaller things, to float on the surface of your water, because these small things cannot break the attraction between these water molecules. No? So that's why they float. And kasi nga, they are quite small and they are lighter. But when you have bigger things, just like boats, your ships, cruise ships, these big things are actually made possible to float because of another force, which is now the buoyant force. Okay? So the buoyant force now is the force exerted by your water as your water is displaced by placing these huge things on them. So the displaced, number 13, wala po pong 13. So, when you put the ships now, there are water, an amount of water which is equal to the weight of your ship, is displaced by your ship. So this displacement of your water, as well as the force pushing the ship upward because of the displaced water, is what we call the buoyant force. Okay? So the difference now is that, para mawala po yung confusion, the difference now is that when you have small things, for instance, you have leaves, paper clips, in this case, toothpick, pag maliliit po yung mga bagay, the thing or the main cause of them floating on your water is surface tension, brought about by the presence of cohesive property of your water, cohesion. Now, if you have bigger things floating on water, then that's the time your buoyant force is acting upon them. Okay? So that's the main difference. So 13, you have letter A, surface tension. Number 14, what color of flame in the flame test indicates the presence of boron in a solution? So A, bright green, B, yellow gold, C, brick, red, D, lilac. So yes, letter A, bright green. So for boron, the result for the flame test would be bright green. Eventually, there are many tables in the internet that list down these elements together with the color, after testing them using the flame test. So just review those tables. So for this case, your boron is bright. When you go to yellow gold, what is this element? Your yellow gold can be sodium. No? Your brick red can be calcium or cadmium, no? For instance. When you say lilac, no, this is actually the color produced by your potassium. So different elements will result into different colors, no? If you subject them to flame test. And just review those tables, no, in the internet for this particular um, subject or topic. Okay? Number 15. So which of the following is a characteristic of metalloids? So A, they are excellent conductors of heat and electricity. B, they look like nonmetals with the chemical properties of metals. C, they conduct heat and electricity better than metals. Or D, they have properties of both metals and nonmetals. What do you think is our answer? Oh yes, letter D, lahat. Oh, wow, perfect. No, so they have yes. Baka kayong lahat yung mag-top notch ha this September exam. So number 15, the answer is letter D. So they have properties of both metals and non-metals. That's why they are called metalloids, no, loid, meaning they are metal-like, but they are not completely metal. So they are an intermediate between your metals and non-metals. No? So A is wrong because they are very poor conductors of heat and electricity. No? They are not excellent conductors of heat and electricity. Letter B is wrong because they look like metals actually, and they have chemical properties of the non-metals. So your letter B here is inverted. You know? So they look like metals, but their properties are like non-metals. Letter C, they conduct heat and electricity better than metals. This is quite wrong because your metals are the most excellent conductors of electricity and heat. No? However, your metalloids, no, in some cases, they are more efficient in conducting electricity and heat compared to non-metals. No? So if you try to rank them, uh, which of them are the best conductors of heat and electricity, the first one would be metals. Then you have your metalloids. Next, your non-metals. So 15 is letter D. Let's go to 16. So the Philippines, together with other countries along the borders of Pacific Ocean, lies along the plate where earthquakes and volcanic activities are more frequent. This tectonic boundary is known as A. West Valley Fault, B. Pacific Ring of Fire, C. Archipelagic Fault Line, D. Pacific Fault Volcanic Rim. Wow! So lahat nag-answer ng letter B. Yes. And you are correct. No? B, or the Pacific Ring of Fire. So basically, no, Philippines is one out of several countries that is found on this particular tectonic boundary. No? So your Pacific Ring of Fire is characterized by very active volcanic activities. No? So maraming volcanoes, and therefore maraming movement ng boundary. And if you have movements of these tectonic plates, then you also have ample amount of earthquakes. Okay? So that's the Pacific Ring of Fire. Next, we go to 17. So what hormones in plants are responsible for promoting auxiliary budding and apical dominance? So A, auxins and gibberellins, B, cytokinins and gibberellins, C, auxins and abscisic acid, D, cytokinins and auxins. O, iba-iba na yung answer. So may nag-A, may nag-B, what else? May nag-A, may nag-D, o isang nag-D, dalawang nag-D. Tatlong nag-D. So answer here actually, no, dear students, the answer here should be letter D, cytokinins and auxins. Now, let's dissect the functions of these plant hormones. Anong difference ng A at B? Okay, o sige, let's dissect their functions. For A, no, You have auxins and gibberellins. No, let's try to what's the name? Uh, let's try to determine first the functions of these plant hormones. No, for auxins, your auxin is for apical dominance. No? So what do you mean by apical dominance? The terminal portion of your plants are actively dividing, no, in terms of cell division. That's why the apical dominance would pertain to the growth and development of the shoots of your plants. So basically, what is acting on these cells, no, or part of your plants is your auxin hormone. So auxin is for apical dominance. When you say gibberellins, these are plant hormones which acts upon, no, on seed germination and flowering of your plants. So basically, the more gibberellin hormones are is there in your plant, no, the the faster the rate of seed germination as well as formation of flowers. Okay? Now, when you go to cytokinins, these are the plant hormones that is actually for auxiliary budding. So these are the hormones that initiates the formation of your buds. Okay? When you go to lastly, abscisic acid, and your abscisic acid is the plant hormone which is antagonistic to your gibberellin. When you say antagonistic, no, the function of your abscisic acid is quite the opposite of your gibberellin. No? So, your gibberellin, take note, is for production of flower and seed germination. So, if your abscisic acid is the opposite, then the function of your abscisic acid is actually for seed dormancy, or plant growth dormancy. So meaning it slows down the development of the plant. Gibberellin accelerates the production and germination of these seeds. So basically, they are antagonistic to one another. So, since we are looking for the hormones promoting auxiliary budding and apical dominance, so that is letter D, cytokinins and auxins. So I hope I differentiated the plant hormones for this particular example. Okay? So let's go to number 18. The compound MnF3 can be written correctly by its name as blank. So A, manganese fluoride 3, B, manganese 3 fluoride, C, manganese 1 fluoride 3, D, manganese 3 fluoride 3. May nag-B, may nag-B. Okay, so lahat, lahat. Most of you answered letter B, okay? And the answer here is letter B. So manganese 3 fluoride. So in naming a compound, no, from the name itself, compound, it is actually, and it can, oh my heart pa, no? So here, it can be a combination, no? Compound is a combination of two ionic atoms. So in this particular example, you have the cation manganese, which is Mn plus 1, no, or plus alone. And you have fluoride, no, which is, no, sorry. I'll go back. So in this particular compound, you have here cation and anion. No? So for your cation, you have Mn3 plus, no? And you have the cation F negative or F1 negative. No? But it would be written as F negative only, no? Because if you have one particular, if you have the number 1, no, it is by default not written anymore, no, because it is obvious that if you only have minus or plus, then it should be noted that it only contains or is devoid by 1 electron. Okay? So here you have Mn3 plus, and then you also have F negative. Now, if you are combining them, the number or the number of electron that is what you call this one, excess on your cation, no, the 3 plus, would be transferred to your anion, no, which is your fluoride. And your the number of your electron, which is lacking from your fluoride, would be transferred to your cation. In this case, you have 1 negative. So just exchange the numbers, no? And basically you will have Mn1 F3. But since by default again, if you have 1, it is it's actually quite obvious na it would not be included in the naming anymore. No? So the answer here should be letter B. So manganese 3 fluoride. So the 3 in your F would be transferred to manganese, and the 1 in your manganese would be transferred to your fluoride. So B is our correct answer. Number 19, which of the following organism is considered heterotrophic? So A, algae, B, moss, C, grasshopper, D, fern. Oh, may nag-letter A, may nag-grasshopper. Oh, maraming nag-A. Marami din nag-C. So when you say heterotrophic, no? Heterotrophic are organisms that cannot produce their own food, meaning they cannot photosynthesize or chemosynthesize. Okay? See, sure. Yes, so the answer here should be letter C, no? Grasshopper. Okay. So grasshopper is a heterotrophic organism. The opposite of heterotrophic is autotrophic. Auto meaning self. Trophic meaning it has something to do with nutrition. So autotrophic, they are self-sustaining, meaning they can produce their own food. Hetero meaning other. Wait. Okay, there. So hetero meaning other. So heterotrophic, they need others to sustain themselves. So these heterotrophic can be in the form of omnivores, carnivores, and herbivores. Okay? Your autotrophs are producers. So here, algae, moss, fern, these are actually photosynthetic organisms. So they can produce their own food. Therefore, they are considered as autotrophic. Grasshoppers, they eat grass. So that's why they are heterotroph. They cannot produce their own food. So let's go to number 20. Polysaccharides, triglycerides, polypeptides, and nucleic acids are classified as black. So A, macromolecules, B, carbohydrates, C, phospholipids, D, acids and bases. Wow, yes. The answer here, most of you got the right answer. So letter A, no? Macromolecules. These are just the other terms used for our, may nag-phospholipid. A po yung answer, ha? So, these are just the other terms for your macromolecules. Now, for instance, when you say polysaccharide, this is a type of carbohydrate. Okay? Your triglycerides, these are actually your lipids, no? The fats. Your polypeptide chain is actually your proteins. No? Why polypeptide chain? Because what comprises your protein? Ano po yung nag-compose ng protein po ninyo? Starts with letter A. Do you know? Blank acid. What particular acid? Amino acid. Yes. So your amino acid comprised proteins, okay? And your proteins is a chain of amino acids, meaning you have several amino acids that are being linked to one another. This link or bond is what you call a peptide bond. Okay? So if you have a chain of amino acid, then you also have a chain of peptide bonds. That's why you call it as polypeptides. So a polypeptide is a protein. And then you have nucleic acid, which are found in your DNA and RNA. So therefore, these four organic matter are your macromolecules. So the answer here should be letter A. Next, we have question 21. Okay, so pressure is defined as force exerted at a given unit area. Its unit is Newton per square meter and is equivalent to blank. This is quite a simple identification, no? It is only um, it is only conversion, no, of one unit to another unit. So the answer here is quite simple, is A, Pascal. Uh, yeah, there. So A, Pascal. Eventually, no, just remember that you have tables also for conversion. So try to review them also. Okay. So next we have 22. No? So the mass of gemstones is usually measured in terms of metric carat. This measure of mass is equivalent to blank. So you have A, 2000 mg, B, 1000 milligram, C, 200 milligram, D, 100 milligram. Again, no, just like your number 21, this is a simple conversion of unit. So 1 metric carat is eventually equal to, letter C, 200 milligram. Okay. So next, we have question 23. Of the following organisms, which is classified under kingdom Plantae? So A, prokaryotes, B, fungi, C, magnoliae, D, protozoa. Oh. So ano po yung hindi po familiar sa inyo? Usually that's not the correct answer, no? So for letter C, you have magnoliae. These are actually under the kingdom Plantae. So magnoliae, it is a group of flowering and fruit bearing plants. So eventually you have um, an example for magnoliae is your Annona squamosa. No? Um, ano po answer 22? Letter C. So 23, Annona squamosa. Fern is actually another phylum, no? Pteridophyta. Your magnoliae is phylum Magnoliophyta. So these are flowering plants. Your fern does not have flowers. Okay. So for magnoliae, example, you have Annona squamosa or your Attis. No? You also have Annona moricata or your Goyabano. No? Those are magnoliae plants. Prokaryotes, these are unicellular organisms, eukaryotic in nature. You have protozoa as well as algae. Fungi, you have mushrooms, the yeast, and the molds. Protozoa, um, this is proteins. Sorry, for prokaryotes, you have bacteria. So, currently, how many kingdoms do we have? As proposed by Carl Woos. Eventually, we have 6 kingdoms. So, what are these kingdoms? So, first kingdom, you have kingdom Archaebacteria. So, under your Archaebacteria, these are the bacteria that loves extreme environments. So, very hot, no, environments, very salty, no, high in methanogens and toxins, and so on and so forth. So these particular bacteria are very extreme. When you go to second kingdom, you have kingdom Eubacteria. So kingdom Eubacteria are the true bacteria. So they can be found in your skins, for example, no, soil, in air, in water. So these are the most abundant types of bacteria. The next is your kingdom Protista. So under Protista, you have Protozoa, no, the letter D, as well as your algae. And then next, you have kingdom Fungi. So under Fungi, you have the unicellular yeast and the multicellular molds and mushrooms. For the fifth kingdom, you have kingdom Plantae. So this is now the world of plants. And lastly, you have kingdom Animalia, which comprises na all the animals on the planet. So 23, your answer is letter C, Magnolidae. Number 24, the time it takes for the Earth to complete a 30-degree rotation is blank. So A, 2 hours, B, 4 hours, C, 6 hours, D, 8 hours. What do you think is our answer? A, B, C, or D? D. Oh, ang daming nag-D. Lahat kayo nag-D. 23. Ano 23C? 24 na po tayo. May isang nag-A. Dalawa nang nag-A. So actually, the answer here should be letter A, 2 hours. So how do we determine the time it takes for the Earth to complete a 30 degrees rotation? So basically, in a day, you have how many hours? How many hours in one day? 24, okay. And for a complete rotation of the planet Earth, meaning a complete rotation for a circle is how many degrees? 360. Okay, so 360 divided by 24, that's actually 1 hour per 15 degrees. Okay, so therefore, since we are looking for 30 degrees, so 15 times 2, no, you have 30. So therefore, 1 hour times 2, you have 2 hours. 1 hour, it's, yes, no, 360, anong number na? Okay. Anong number na po yan sa reviewer? Di ko po alam. I'll check na lang po. Wala po, added na lang po. Ayan. Oo, added po tong remaining questions. Okay, from 24 to 30. So for 24, it should be 2 hours. No? So you just divide the complete rotation for a circle, which is 360 degrees, divided by the number of hours in a given day, that's 24. So you get 15 degrees per 1 hour. So eventually, you will have 2 hours. Here, the element francium has an atomic number of 87. Given this information, which of the following statement is correct? A, francium has electrons and protons equal to 87. D, francium has an atomic mass of 87. C, francium has 87 electrons. D, francium has 87 protons. O, apat ang nag-answer ng letter D. D. Oh, yes. Lahat ay nag-letter D. And the correct answer is letter B. Francium has 87 protons. Okay? Letter A is wrong because it says that electrons and protons are equal to 87. So therefore, we could say that each of them, the electron is approximately 43.5, which is wrong, because it is given in our statement that the francium has 87 atomic number, which would translate that your francium element has 87 of protons and 87 electrons. Okay? Take note, this is a normal or an undecayed francium element. Okay? So in a stable element, the atomic number is always equal to the number of protons. And the number of protons is also equal to the number of electrons. So A is wrong because it says that electrons plus protons is equal to 87. Letter B, francium has an atomic mass of 87. This is also quite wrong because atomic mass is equal to the number of protons and the number of neutrons. So the 87 here is only representative of the number of protons, which would make letter B wrong. For letter C, francium has 87 neutrons. This is also wrong because, once again, your atomic number is a representative of your protons. How do you get the number of neutrons? So you just have to derive your formula from the formula of atomic mass. So since your atomic mass is equal to protons, number of protons plus number of neutrons. So you just have to derive your formula from newtons that will give you number of neutrons is equal to atomic mass minus number of protons. Okay? Here, in this particular question, we cannot determine the number of neutrons because it is not given. No, we are only given by the number of protons. Then, for francium, no, for letter D, this is our correct answer because once again, the atomic number is the representation of the number of protons. Protons plus neutrons. Yes, that's atomic mass. Okay. So for 25, the answer is letter D. Next, 26. So which of the following is not true about energy pyramid? So A, organisms at the tip of the pyramid receives the highest amount of energy. B, amount of energy transferred decreases from the from the bottom to top. C, each trophic level loses energy in the form of heat. D, producers are located at the bottom, that's bottom part of the pyramid. Which do you think is the correct answer? Wow, ang daming nag-answer ng letter A, which is basically our right answer. So organisms at the tip of the pyramid receives the highest amount of energy. Because what is correct here, no, the organisms at the tip of our pyramid, food pyramid, receives the lowest amount of energy, not the highest. That is why you have the pyramid. No? The pyramid shape there is actually a representation of the amount of energy being transferred from one trophic level to the next, or from the bottom part of the pyramid going to the topmost part of the pyramid. So at the basal portion of your food pyramid, you have there the producers, and they are getting their food because of the presence also of the sunlight. No? So they have the most abundant energy because they are the ones who are producing, no, the inorganic energy into organic forms, no, in the form of glucose or carbohydrate. So from producers, you move to the next trophic level, which are the herbivores. No? From the herbivores, you go to carnivores, and then from carnivores, no, you have first order consumer, second order consumer, third, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, on top of our food pyramid are the apex predators. No? So these are now the predators with no known natural enemy. So basically, the energy from the bottom going to the top of the pyramid is decreasing through time because at every level or every step, and there are energies that are being lost in the form of heat. Okay? So answer for 26 is letter A. Next, 27. So which of the following observations is not involved in a chemical change? So A, change in color, B, change in shape, C, formation of bubbles, D, production of heat. Wow, so again, lahat na naman ay correct. So the answer here is letter B, change in shape. Sorry, there. Okay. So you have two types of changes, no? So physical change or chemical change. So your physical change would only refer to the change in the physical appearance of your object, no, or material. So in this case, you have shape, no, or texture or form, no. Deformities are only referring to chemical change. When you say physical change, when you have chemical change, now there is now a change in the chemical composition of your material. So in this case, if you have change in color, that would also mean the chemical composition is also changed because each chemicals have their own unique luster or color. No? And formation of bubbles, it denotes chemical change because there is now formation of gaseous compounds, no, from your original material, which can be, for example, a solid, but solid and liquid, no, for instance, but then In the process of mixing, you form bubbles. So therefore, there is new chemical that is being produced. And then, if you have production of heat, that's also another character of chemical change, as to where breaking of bonds, no, ionic bonds, covalent bonds, and hydrogen bonds, if you break these bonds, there is production of heat, no, exothermic reaction. Yes. No? So eventually, A, C, and D are involved in chemical change. So answer here should be letter B. B, change in shape, is denoting physical change. Number 28. So which of the following is not an example of active transport? A. Pinocytosis. B. Facilitated diffusion. C. Phagocytosis. D. Sodium-potassium pump. Tatlong nag-B. B. What else? Wow, yes. So answer here, lahat na naman ay tama. I'm very impressed, no, and very happy. So answer here is facilitated diffusion. So you have two basically no types of transport, cellular transport. You have um, active transport. You also have passive transport. So it has something to do. No, the main difference here has something to do with the movement of your material across your concentration gradient, as well as the usage of energy in the form of ATP. If you say passive transport, the movement is from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. No? And there is no expenditure of energy. So meaning you're not using ATPs. When you say active transport, the movement is from lower concentration going to higher concentration. And this time around, you are using energy in the form of ATP. No, it's like, no, if you put it in an analogy, it's like a person moving along the slopes of a mountain. No? So if, for example, if you picture a man carrying a pail of water, and the man is walking from the base of your mountain going to the top of your mountain, no? As compared to a man carrying a pail of water starting from the tip of your mountain going down, which do you think is more difficult? The first or the second? Going up, yes, because you are going against gravitational pull. No? First, tama kayo. No? Same as your cellular transport. Since your passive transport is starting from higher concentration going to the lower concentration, then there is no expenditure of energy. Same as moving along a slope, no, from the tip of the mountain going down. No? It's easier for you to walk in that direction. However, active transport, you need to use energy because you are from a lower concentration going to the greater concentration region, concentrated region. So you need to spend energy. So here, your two types of processes involved in your passive transport would be diffusion as well as osmosis. No? Diffusion refers to the net movement of materials, no, from region of higher to lower concentration. Osmosis, on the other hand, is a form of diffusion where um, it is actually the water movement, no, from higher concentration to lower concentration. So definitely diffusion is a form of passive, not active. So pinocytosis, phagocytosis, and sodium potassium pumps are actually active transport. Pinocytosis and phagocytosis uh, are processes involved in what you call endocytosis. So endocytosis meaning the cell is acquiring material from the environment. No? Movement is from outside going to inside of the cell, as opposed to the exocytosis. So exo meaning from inside of the cell going out. So pinocytosis is cell drinking, meaning the material being engulfed is in liquid form. Phagocytosis is cell eating. So what is transferred into the interior of the cell are solid particles. So 28, letter B. O, second to the last question, 29. Which of the following is not an example of a colloid? So A, orange juice, B, hair gel, C, mayonnaise, D, plaster. Wow, ang galing. So letter A is our answer. Orange juice is not a colloid. Then what is an orange juice? What particular mixture is an orange juice? What type of mixture? Yes, your orange juice is a homogeneous mixture. So you have two types, homogeneous, heterogeneous mixture. Okay, so under homogeneous, you have the orange juice, no? Or what is the specific type of orange juice under homogeneous? Yes, solution. So orange juice is a solution, meaning the two components, you can never distinguish them if you mix them. So in this case, your orange powder is dissolved in your water medium. Now, water plus orange powder. So that will make a solution. In your heterogeneous mixture, hetero meaning again other, no, you can distinguish the materials that are being mixed. So under your heterogeneous, you can have suspension and colloid. So in your colloid, the the materials that are being suspended in your medium are actually quite little and they are less dense. So they are suspended along or across your liquid, solid, or gaseous medium. So in your hair gel, for example, if you um, if you visualize or if you picture a hair gel, no, in a particular transparent container, you would notice that the gel there, you have the liquid gel, and you also have several air bubbles suspended in your gel. No? So these air bubbles through time do not settle at the bottom. Okay? If these particular air bubbles or air pockets do not settle down, then these materials are what you call colloid. However, if your if your materials will suspend at the bottom or settles down at the bottom, no, for instance, when you are mixing water and sand, no, your sand eventually through time will settle at the bottom. So that is what we call suspension. Okay? So if it doesn't settle down, that's what you call colloid. Okay? So in this particular example, no, example for your colloids therefore would be hair gel, you have mayonnaise, and you have plaster. Okay? So that's for number 29. And last question for tonight. No, volcanoes are created when blank. A, two continental crusts collide. B, two oceanic crusts collide. C, a continental crust and magma chamber collide. D, a continental crust and oceanic crust collide. What do you think is our answer here? Letter. Oh, so lahat na naman kayo ay nag-answer ng letter D. Okay, so the answer, correct answer is letter D. Okay, so when we try to recall your geology, topics, your planet Earth is subdivided into different layers. No? So what are these layers? Or what is the outermost layer of your planet? Can you name it? Yes, the crust. No? Then you have the mantle, then you have the core. No? Your crust is divided into two types. Your mantle or also, no, you have outer and inner mantle. Then your core, you also have the outer and inner core. Your crust also is actually comprised of two types of crust. No? You have oceanic and you have continental crust. Your continental crust is less dense compared to your oceanic crust. No? So if it's less dense, so that would mean your continental crust would float above your oceanic crust. No? So if you have two continental crusts colliding to one another, what would happen? Would it move up or would it move down? What do you think? Continental, continental, colliding, moving up. Yes. Why move up? Because again, they are less dense compared to oceanic crust. So if you have oceanic colliding, it would also move, it will move down because your oceanic crust are denser compared to your continental crust. No? So eventually, if you have two continental crusts colliding with one another, then that's the time you will form mountain ranges, okay, or mountains. If you have two oceanic crusts, then that's the time you will be forming trenches. No? For example, you have the Philippine Trench, no? The Philippine Deep, the Marianas Trench. No? If you have continental and oceanic crust, one is less dense, the other is denser. So what would happen? The less dense crust would move up, the denser plate would move down. Because of these differences of movement, then the materials of the denser plate, which is the oceanic crust, no, will melt because of high pressure and temperature beneath the crust. As it melts down, what happens? There, it will form eventually magma chamber. And that magma chamber, because of pressure, would release heat and molten materials towards the upper portion and would create volcanoes eventually. So answer for number 30 is letter D. Continental crust and oceanic crust colliding with one another. That's the last question for tonight. I hope you learned and reviewed your past topics in natural science. No, if you have questions, you can ask me, or you can reach me, no, through email or you can message Miss Clarissa.
Tama
Sir
naman 'yan.
AJ.
Sir, maraming salamat. Thank you for this
Sure.
evening. Talaga namang, napakahusay ng ating discussion ngayong gabi. And
Di
I'm
naman
sure talaga na marami talagang natutunan ng mga bata. Ayan.
na-pressure kasi ako sa introduction mo, Sir AJ.
Actually, ako nga na-pressure sa mga pangalan ng mga lamok na 'yan.
Ay,
Naganda ba
salamat po pala
actually, sa
sa
totoo
lahat
lang,
ng... Ah, yes
sa
po.